When most people talk of East Africa, they always mention Kenya, but Uganda is never mentioned, and I don't know why. There's more to Uganda than Kampala and safaris. First on our stop is Jinja. Jinja is known as the adventure capital of the world and the home of the source of the Nile. We're heading out to take a boat ride on the Nile. It's about a 2-hour ride. I don't know how many people know, but the source of the Nile was identified to be in Jinja, Uganda. And that's where I'm presently at. And we're going to go see the source and take a ride around town, see what else we see. One of the things you want to do when you visit Jinja is to absolutely take a boat ride on the Nile. The first thing that you'll notice is that it is expansive. It is much bigger and wider than what I had anticipated. The cost for a tour ranges anywhere from $20 to $60. Now what's interesting is right in the middle of the Nile, there is a floating structure and there is a store inside, and this is where you'll actually see the sign for the source of the Nile. There's no other way to see it than to take a boat ride. So once you get to the middle of this Nile River and you're in this structure, it's kind of cool because there's a little gift store inside. And although the water has been rising over the last couple of years, as they explained to me, they are still operating. And the reason that they're operating is because it benefits people from the community that surrounds the Nile River. Now they sell everything from clothing to trinkets to jewelry, and it's a cool little shop and a cool way to kind of support the communities in the area by buying some gifts. As you can see from here, the water is rising. I thought it was sinking, but they actually said the water is rising, the water levels are rising, which is submerging this structure. But they are still keeping it open as a tourist structure, and it really is a cool thing to see. It's really crazy how Lake Victoria and the Nile River converges in this location, and you can see the difference in the water from the Nile and the water from Victoria Falls. You can see how it churns, and it's just a really cool thing to see. Another thing that you'll notice is there are all kind of restaurants and hotels that are lining the banks of the Nile River. And what's interesting, that was a bust of Mahatma Gandhi, who chose to have his ashes scattered in Lake Victoria and the Nile River in Jinja. If you're into fishing, you have the opportunity to fish for Nile perch and for tilapia. Now they use the old way of fishing with these kind of cool nets. I wish I could have gotten a video of it, but you have an opportunity to actually go fishing on the Nile. I had the opportunity to have some Nile perch, and it was absolutely delicious. As I exit the launch pad here, if you have an opportunity to take a cruise on the Nile, there is a small village here that I think that everybody should go and support. Next stop is Mbale. It's a sleepy little town located between Jinja and Sipi. At think people overlook Mbale, but there's so much to do in Mbale, and one of the coolest things to do is to hike Wanale Falls. Now, Wanale Falls is a series of multiple waterfalls, but the main waterfall is about a 3 to 4 hour hike. And what's really nice, this is a really affordable activity to do. But the other cool perk is if you have a desire to visit a local village and to kind of see how things are in local villages, to go to a coffee plantation, this is the perfect hike. This takes you through villages. You have the opportunity to naturally interact with locals. There are bridges, there are brooks. This is just a really beautiful, beautiful hike. And there's parts of this hike that are just absolutely stunning and mind-blowing. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a moderate hike. And in the summertime, when it's hot as shit, this is a heck of a hike. So come prepared with water and wear light clothing, and try not to bring a backpack that's too heavy, because this is a moderate hike, or I would say a little bit more than moderate. But it is absolutely stunning. It takes approximately 4 to 5 hours to make it to the base of the hike. There are some areas that were uphill, but mainly the biggest problem was that the ground was very muddy and it made it for a very slippery hike. The other great part of this hike was I went with a young local tour guide, and he was able to provide me with some insight and actually a lot of history on the region and the people from the region. And that is because he lives in the region. And this took the whole trip to the next level. There's nothing like having someone who has a first-hand knowledge of every single aspect of this region. And if you don't look at this waterfall, when I say the sound was crazy and it was just gorgeous. Although the hike was challenging, and I swear I thought I was going to pass out, just being in the company of this young man, Manafa, and being able to hear the history about his people and the pride he takes in being in Mbale was worth every single sweat, every single fall, and every single bruise. So please put Mbale on your list of places to go. And next up is Sipi. If you've been to Uganda and you've heard of Sipi Falls, when I first heard Sipi Falls, I thought it was one waterfall. But Sipi Falls is actually a series of 3 waterfalls, the largest being the 393 feet. And what's crazy is people actually abseil from the top of that waterfall. That wasn't something that I was going to do. Now, this again is a moderate to difficult hike depending on the weather. It was difficult and challenging because it was extremely muddy, and every step that you took, you just had to be super careful because you would be slipping and sliding all over the place. Now, don't come for me. Yes, I hike in hiking sandals, but the hiking sandals was not doing it on this hike. I was almost going to kill myself in those sandals, and that's partially because the mud got on the inside and it became very slippery. So there was a point that I just took the sandals off and I decided to walk barefoot in the mud because it was just too much. But I have to tell you that Sipi Falls is absolutely breathtaking as well. The 3 waterfalls, it's not an easy hike to get to the largest waterfall, to get to the base of it. The second waterfall, which is here, is a little less difficult, but it's a lot more uphill. But once you get to the base of the waterfall and you feel and you hear the power of its roar, it was absolutely worth every single step that I took. And I tell you, it was muddy as I don't know what. It had rained the day before and it was muddy, which made it a more challenging hike. So if you do this hike, please come prepared with the proper shoes. Come prepared to get wet if you make it to the base of the waterfalls, and be prepared for a strenuous hike. And it takes about 4 to 5 hours to cover all 3 waterfalls, and you do have the ability to drive or take a moto from one waterfall to the next. I don't believe that there's a way to hike all three, but I would definitely have to check. What also enhanced this trip was these two young brothers that I just decided to DM on Instagram, and they showed me a hell of a time. I had a great time hiking with them. They're a young tour company, and they had insider knowledge, and actually one of them lives in the village at the base of the first waterfall. So that was kind of cool to be able to get firsthand knowledge of the village and the people in the village and the crops that they grow, which is basically coffee and bananas, and just having that firsthand knowledge. And he's also on couch surfing, Kisi and Simeon. And so if you decide to go to Sipi Falls, I have their contact information at the end of this. But this is a beautiful hike. It is a long hike, but I tell you that it is absolutely worth every single step that you take. And this is another affordable activity that you can do if you decide to come to the Sipi area. Now, I stayed in Mbale because it was cheaper to stay in Mbale than it was to stay in the Sipi area. But again, this is a hike you absolutely want to put on your list. Look at this waterfall, and you just can't imagine the force of this waterfall from the bottom. It was just standing 10-20 feet away, you were getting wet because between the wind and how full the water was because it had rained the day before.